Welcome to Solar Alberta's 2024 Solar Show, our 10th annual solar show. Today's session is called Solar for Multifamily Homes. Please note that we have enabled closed captioning for this presentation. You can turn the captioning on in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. My name is Sheila Innes, and I am the Vice President on Solar Alberta's board. Today, I am joining you from Oginsus, in the heart of Southern Alberta, also known as Calgary. I would like to acknowledge and pay tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7 and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Treaty 7 includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. We at Solar Alberta join all nations in celebrating the unique histories, traditions, cultures, and contributions of Indigenous peoples as we continue our journey on the road toward reconciliation together. We are delighted to have so many people register for this week and for this event. To start, we would like to thank Enbridge for sponsoring the 2024 Solar Show and Park Power for sponsoring this exciting session. We're happy and grateful to have them as our sponsors. Today, we will be hearing from Heather McKenzie and Greg Sauer. Following the presentation, there will be a Q&A session in which you can all participate. We will be using the Zoom Q&A for questions rather than the chat, so please enter your questions in the Q&A section. Also, please click on the little thumbs up to upvote the questions that you like. The entire session will wrap up in about an hour. I would like to encourage you to check out our online trade show during the next couple of days. We have listed on this slide all the participants, and in the chat, the wonderful organizations who are participating in the trade show. To view their exhibitor booths, which include a listing of key solar-related services, contact information, and video presentations, please click on the link in the chat. Before we move forward, we're going to do a quick poll to get a sense of who we have joining us today. Please take a minute to answer the question that is popping up on your screen now. While some of you are doing the poll, I encourage you to take a minute to pop your name, land acknowledgement, and any contact information you're comfortable sharing in the chat now and throughout the event, so that you and others can stay connected on LinkedIn or other means. Okay, we'll just wait for the results. Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. Lots of curious people. Great, great. I bet there's a lot of apartment dwellers out there. So we're glad that you can join in. Thank you very much for coming. And now to share a little bit about who we are. Solar Alberta is now in its 33rd year of operation. We are a not-for-profit society that is dedicated to accelerating Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. We do so by advocating, educating, and serving as an industry and community hub for solar energy. Our membership is made up of over 760 individuals and 170 businesses. We provide a number of services, including managing a solar directory through our website. You can see a screenshot of the directory here on this slide and a link to it in the chat. In addition to our website services, we run a number of educational programs, as well as in-person and online networking events. Many recordings can be found on our YouTube channel. This spring, we will once again be running a number of online courses for solar industry professionals or for those transitioning into the sector. Our courses are online Tuesday and Thursday evenings on 3 to 5 nights over 2 to 3 weeks. First up is the economics of grid-tied solar PV. You can register already for these courses, and again, a link is provided in the chat. We are also offering a new buy 3, get codes free bundle. This bundle includes the 4 technical courses on the roster. The link to purchase the bundle is being placed in the chat. Recordings of these courses are available for sale alongside our paid workshops in the solar training video section of our website. With respect to our advocacy work, we have a number of different campaigns running currently, which include template letters that you can use to contact decision makers. Please send letters today requesting the Canada Greener Homes Grant be refinanced, requesting an end to the provincial moratorium on renewable power plants, and requesting a number of supports for solar and energy efficient upgrades to homes and businesses in Alberta. We also have free Rise Up for Renewables lawn signs available for pickup in 11 municipalities around Alberta. Please click on the link in the chat to access all our templates and to make a sign order today. Now that you know a little bit about us, we would like to take this opportunity to encourage you to become a Solar Alberta member. Membership is only $35 for individuals, and this week only, you can purchase an individual or student membership with a 20% discount. The link to become a member is also being placed in the chat. On April 24th, we will be hosting our annual general meeting, and I would like to invite you to all sign up as members, attend, and elect our new board. There are several vacancies to fill on the board this year. If you are interested in serving on the board, you're welcome to do so on our website through February 29th. With your help, we are recognizing a long-time dedicated contributors to Solar Alberta by gifting them a free lifetime Solar Alberta membership. If you know someone who has contributed significantly to the organization or to the solar sector in Alberta as a whole, please consider becoming a member and nominating them for this award. We are accepting nominations until April 3rd, and the award recipients will be announced at our AGM. We are pleased to announce the Solar Alberta Diversity Scholarship. This scholarship is intended for equity-deserving individuals. Through the scholarship, we are seeking to promote inclusivity, amplify historically marginalized voices, and encourage diverse perspectives and participation in the solar and solar-related sector. We will award $2,000 to one equity-deserving individual registered in an Alberta training program that aligns with our mission. We will be accepting applications until April 30th. Eligibility details and scholarship application are available by clicking on the link in the chat. We thank Enbridge for their generous sponsorship of this scholarship. Finally, we ask that you consider participating in our 50/50 raffle, which is now over $2,400. The 50/50 raffle ticket sales will close on Friday, tomorrow, and Heather will be doing the draw live at 5 p.m. during the Solar and Friends Mentoring and Networking event. And now I'm delighted to get the session underway, and I will introduce our speakers. Heather McKenzie. Heather is the Executive Director of Solar Alberta, where she and her team work very hard to accelerate Alberta's transition to a just and sustainable energy future. She is a seasoned leader, community organizer, and green business advocate. Prior to becoming the Executive Director of Solar Alberta, she worked as a government relations professional, ran her own business, and served as an elected trustee on the Edmonton Public School Board. She's in the midst of completing a master's in public administration, has a master's in international development, and has undergraduate degrees, both sociology and history. She believes that investing in solar is a very concrete way that everyday Albertans can take meaningful action on climate change. Following Heather will be Greg Sauer. Greg is a former municipal land use and policy planner with a long-standing interest in renewable energy dating back to the early 2000s. Since 2016, Greg has been involved in solar voltaics with a strong understanding and background in solar PV design, procurement, project management, and construction, in addition to working as a sales leader with Skyfire Energy. Greg has experience with residential, commercial, and utility scale projects, including as an author of several feasibility studies for multifamily residential, commercial, and small-scale utility projects. So I'll now turn it over to Heather to share her insights. Thanks, Heather.
And thank you, Sheila. It's wonderful to have so many of our amazing board members here with us at the Solar Show this week. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be starting this session by giving you an overview of the various types of multifamily homes and how solar relates to each of them. After my presentation, I'm going to pass the mic to Greg. He's going to share some concrete examples of how these arrays look in the community and tell you about some of the financial matters. I look forward to diving into your questions with Greg and Sheila after the presentation. So I'd like to start with a brief overview of how solar works on a typical single-family home in Alberta. This will give you folks a bit of context before broadening the conversation. Here's a quick rundown. First, sunlight hits the solar modules that are installed on the home. That's represented by number 1. In the northern hemisphere, south-facing roofs get the best sun. East and west-facing roofs also work. The solar PV modules are going to convert the sunlight into DC electricity, which is direct current. This electricity is going to travel to the inverter, which is indicated by number 2, or alternatively to a microinverter located behind the module on the roof. That will convert the DC electricity into AC, or alternating current electricity, which is what your home uses. This electricity is then fed into the house's main electrical panel, shown by number 3. From here, the electricity generated by the solar system can go in one of 2 directions. If the home is not consuming a lot of energy, the electricity can go back to the main power grid indicated by number 6. And because it isn't being used by the household, that will show up as a credit on the electricity bill. If the home is using a lot of electricity, then the electricity from the solar system will be used to power everything that is using electricity in the home at that time, such as home appliances, demonstrated by the light bulb, or number 5, which must be an electric vehicle that's charging. Since this energy is coming directly from the solar system rather than from the electricity grid, the homeowner is not being charged for that electricity, and they're going to avoid some variable portions of the delivery charge as well. If the home is using more electricity than is being produced by the solar system, the home will consume all of the energy from its solar system and then import any additional electricity required from the grid. The grid essentially serves as a supplement or auxiliary system. When a homeowner gets solar installed, they may get a bidirectional meter installed, which is shown by number 4. And in some jurisdictions, like here in Edmonton with EPCOR, they may have already installed smart meters. These meters are going to keep track of both the electricity taken from the grid as well as the electricity put onto the grid. All right, now getting into the multifamily dynamic, and this is a picture of my home actually. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit. The easiest multifamily home to pop solar on is a freehold multifamily home. So freehold means the homeowner has control over the property. And whether you're sharing walls with one other family or 16, as long as you own the property and don't belong to a condominium structure, then you're relatively good to go. In the situation shown in this image, each homeowner in the row has their own electricity meter and their own utility bill. So their process for installing solar is almost identical to that of a single-family detached homeowner. If this is your situation, one limiting factor might be the amount of roof space that you have. In a very high-density multifamily freehold scenario, you might not have enough space on your roof or ideal orientation to offset all of your on-site electricity consumption. Also, some builders do put up unnecessary, or what I like to call spurious, gables and other obstructions on roofs, and that can limit productive solar space. We had an entire presentation earlier this week on solar-ready design, and since that will be on our YouTube channel, I won't go much into that right now. But don't let imperfect roof orientation or design stop you. Get some quotes from a number of reputable solar installers today, and they can let you know what your solar prospects are. Okay, so you may be thinking, Heather, this is the same slide, but it's not. We are imagining a different ownership structure now. So imagine this row home is now part of a condominium. things get a little more complicated. In this instance, there is a pretty good chance that you have your own electricity meter and utility bills, so that part is relatively simple. But you likely need condo board approval to move forward because it is highly likely that the roof itself is considered common property. In a row home condominium situation, we recommend you ask your board for approval for the installation and then get a number of quotes from reputable solar installers. In some cases, you might get really lucky and have a condo board that already put provisions for solar into your condo docs. Be sure to give your condo docs a read, find out about any roof solar provisions before spending too much time working on the request through your board. And when giving you permission, the board might need to add a few stipulations about how it is the unit owner's responsibility to pay for deinstallation of solar if or when a roof repair is needed. If you have any trouble convincing your board to approve your request, we actually have a presentation on our YouTube channel called Solar the Good Neighbor, and you can check it out. It gives you some helpful tools for communicating about how wonderful solar is. All right, now we're going to take to the skies and shift gears to condominium apartment buildings. Here, as an individual unit owner, you might be a little bit disappointed. You will likely not be able to install solar to offset your individual unit's consumption. This can be a really hard pill to swallow, and I know it was for me when I was in an apartment condo. However, you can work with your board to get a solar system on the roof to offset communal electricity costs, such as those for an elevator or hallway lighting. And that can in turn reduce your condo fees. So in this case, the board will be the client and they will have access to the meter for those communal electricity uses. They will also be the roof owner. So to get started here, as a commercial enterprise, the board will likely need to request a feasibility study from a reputable company. And we actually have a request for quotes on our website. You can use that system to request a feasibility study. That can have some costs associated with it. One potential limiting factor that a feasibility study would uncover may be the layout of your roof. It could negatively impact the ability of installers to access and bring installation materials onto the roof, depending on the layout. And ultimately, the harder it is to get things up on the roof, the higher the cost of the installation. So cost might be a barrier for some, but certainly not for all, as you can see in this photo here. There are absolutely condo boards going full steam ahead. So one of the challenges that I mentioned previously for solar on apartment buildings is that you might not have enough roof space to offset the electricity usage for all of the residents in the complex. This is a problem that some net zero developers have overcome by purchasing offsets for high emitting energy that they're pulling from the grid. Others have added solar integrated products such as solar siding, windows, railings, and awnings. These are products that have solar PV technology integrated directly into them. Building integrated solar PV is better suited for commercial builds or multifamily homes rather than single-family homes at this particular juncture. These products typically require relatively custom installations, and therefore they're often more expensive compared to conventional solar PV modules. They also tend to produce less electricity than conventional PV due to their orientations and tilts and their less efficient materials. So you'll typically need more modules to generate the same amount of electricity as a typical rooftop array. It is definitely worth considering, though, if you want to significantly reduce your electricity bills on site and be green. This photo example shows the Red Deer Polytechnic residence, which has solar siding. While there are ways and means to adopt solar on all of these different forms of multifamily housing, depending on your meter arrangement, your financial mechanisms, and how solar friendly your condo board or landlord is, there can be a number of hoops to jump through. With this in mind, we also recommend exploring multifamily housing options in which solar is already integrated. This could be particularly worthwhile for those of you who don't have the time or energy to jump through too many hoops. There are a few of these solar integrated row homes and apartments popping up around Alberta. I encourage you to keep an eye out for them. This type of one-stop shop is going to be, hands down, the easiest way for you to participate in the solar sector while living in a multifamily complex. Builders such as Landmark, Jamin, Avalon Master, and others are working together with solar installers like our members and Greg here to provide green turnkey products for Albertans. For those of you who live in a multifamily home where you require the support of your landlord or condo board to install solar, and if you don't have that support yet, I want you to take comfort in knowing that the community solar space is also emerging in Alberta. Community generation is where a group of people come together, they invest in a solar development that is not on their own property. A number of cooperatives, community leagues, and Indigenous nations are leading the charge with community generation in Alberta. Here is the Renfrew Solar Carport, a new community-led installation, which is at the Spark Science Centre in Calgary. While community generation is still in its early stages in Alberta, it has the potential to allow apartment dwellers, renters, and others who don't have a solar appropriate roof or solar friendly landlord or condo board an opportunity to contribute to solar production in Alberta and to experience some of the associated financial benefits. We already have 2 members who are actively raising funds for community generation projects in Alberta. So to learn more about those investment opportunities, you can check out the new Invest in Solar page under the Go Solar tab on our Solar Alberta website. All right, thank you. That is all I have to share today. So I'm now going to pass the mic and the screen share to Greg, and I just really look forward to seeing your questions when it's time for that. All righty, Greg, take it away.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to Solar Alberta, and thank you for the lead in, Heather.
Thanks, Greg. I don't have your screen share up quite yet.
All right.
Yeah. There we go. Looking good.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. There we go. So thank you very much for taking your lunch hour for this discussion and in attendance. My hope is that everyone gets what they need from this conversation, but in 15 minutes, it is likely that we'll not be able to get all the way through. I'm happy to connect with each of you by email or phone following this discussion. So as background, Skyfire Energy has been in the renewable energy space for 22 years with our first system, a whopping 600-watt system comprised of 8 75-watt PV panels at the equivalent of $30 per watt. This system was on our founder, David Kelly's Oak Ridge home here in Calgary, and we have since become the de facto old guys or OGs of solar. Personally, you've heard a little bit about my background and interest in solar. It dates back nearly 20 years, and I've been with Skyfire now for about 8 years. And in that time, we've grown from a relatively small shop to about 130 full-time staff, working on everything from retrofit residential, new home construction, commercial utility scale engineering, procurement, and construction. And we also manage approximately 200 megawatts of solar projects in Western Canada. We are fast approaching 5,500 micro-generation connected systems here in Alberta alone. So I really appreciate book recommendations, and if you haven't read this one yet, I do recommend Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So for me, this is a big part of the why. You know, the reality in 2024 is it's not okay to exploit many things, but the sun is one of those things, and I'm entirely okay with exploiting as much of this resource as we possibly can. And despite what you might have read on the internet, our exploitation of the solar resource in Alberta will not lead to a diminished resource in a state like Arkansas. So in my role with Skyfire, I'm often playing the role of gatekeeper. I'm often responsible for responding to commercial and multifamily inquiries, including this one from last week. So As much as I'd like to see solar PV on every building, the reality is quite different in practicality, I'm afraid. This high-rise structure in Calgary's Beltline is an example of a building that is just not a good fit for solar PV. In addition to being in ENMAX's downtown network boundary, which presents some technical challenges and added costs, the very limited roof area, right there, available along with the height, make it nearly impossible to install a PV system that will pay for itself in its service life. In terms of payback, this is a really important consideration, and one that I generally start with. The reason for this is that economics and expected payback are typically the most important factor. And speaking with countless condo board members and representatives, it is my experience that the threshold for payback is typically in the range of 5 to 7 years. This could be a short call for some of you, as I can expect that some may drop off after hearing this. But that kind of payback is very rare in almost all cases. While stating a payback can be a fool's errand due to the deregulated nature of electricity in Alberta, the reality is that paybacks are generally in the range of 10 to 15 years. Well, this may sound like a long time. It is roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the expected service life of a solar PV system. So the reality is that the return on investment for electricity from the grid is 0. And so a 7 to 10% return on investment is not actually that bad by comparison. So just kind of looking a little bit at the project stakeholders that can be involved in a solar PV project, they do vary considerably with new construction projects relative to a retrofit. So the retrofit, it's pretty straightforward. There may be an involvement of a structural engineer, depending on the structure, and possibly a roofing contractor for a roof penetration. That's not true with new construction. New construction, generally, you have a lot of different stakeholders, and this can result in a little bit more complexity. And so I just want to highlight, though, that early involvement of a PV designer can be incredibly important to meet the goals and save a significant amount of money on a project such as this. So Heather alluded to this, but there's a couple of housing typologies, if you will. And so the lower density, what I would call lower medium density, are typically your triplex, fourplex, row houses, stacked townhouses. Those have individual meters, as Heather alluded to, and those are pretty straightforward. In contrast, we've got the larger structures, which are typically have a house meter or a common loads meter. And this is typically what we're seeing inquiries from condo units. And so in this case, what we'd be looking at is a single solar PV system connected to a common loads panel to offset those house loads, and no individual benefit. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about economics. Let's review a couple of opportunities that do exist and a few funding sources. So number one, the Greener Homes Grant. There's a lot of talk around this one. It is $1,000 per kilowatt, up to $5,000 plus $600 towards the energy audit cost. So you need a pre and post. It is expected that this funding is running out and could be ending as early as this month. The Greener Homes loan is not in peril, from what we understand. This one is also a tremendous opportunity. So this is up to $40,000 interest-free money for a period of 10 years. So this loan does stay with the homeowner. So if you sold the home, you'd also need to pay out that loan. In contrast, the Clean Energy Improvement Program, it's also known as PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy, is different in that it's got low interest, so not zero interest, low interest for up to 20 years, so longer amortization. It exists in municipalities that have embraced it. So cities including Calgary, Edmonton, Grand Prairie, Lethbridge, St. Albert, and also a number of smaller towns as well. This loan, however, stays with a property. So that's the important contrast there. And more recently, if an individual does want to market their carbon attributes, they can take it out to market, and there is value in that over a 10-year duration. So there's 3 different ways to fund a project. So for incentives for businesses, so this one's a little bit different. The clean as a starting point, CCA 43.2 is accelerated depreciation. This has existed for several years. It's actually a phased phase out. And so in 2024, the enhanced first year allowance is 75%. and that's dropping to 55% for 2026 and 2027. So if an organization is eligible for 43.2, the accelerated depreciation, they would also be eligible for the Clean Technology ITC. So this is available to taxable Canadian corporations that make investments in eligible property, and would provide for a 20 to 30% refundable tax credit. Refundable tax credit for investments in eligible property acquired and available for use on or after March 28, 2023, and until December 31st, 2033. So there are some considerations still unknown, and it is just draft legislation, so it is waiting for discussion in the House and royal assent. And so these conversations are still around prevailing wage, apprenticeship requirements, etc. So that's why the minimum is 20% and up to 30%. So the Clean Electricity ITC, so this one does not have draft legislation yet. It's a little bit further behind. It's available to taxable and non-taxable entities such as crown corporations, publicly owned utilities, Indigenous communities, and pension funds. This one would also be eligible or available to a condominium corporation, which is incorporated as a not-for-profit. So this one provides a 15% refundable tax credit for eligible investments, which also includes solar PV and battery storage. And this one will become available on budget day 2024, so it's not currently eligible, and for projects that did not begin construction before March 28th of last year. So just a note that I'm not a tax accountant, so I provide this, but you will need to look a little bit further in this with a tax professional. Another form of opportunity or incentive for multifamily is mortgage loan insurance, so MLI Select. And this one, to be quite honest, I don't know as much about. I know enough just to provide this level of information, but it does allow you to access reduced premiums and longer amortization periods, and when you take measures with respect to climate compatibility. So it is a point system to offer insurance incentives for both new construction and existing properties. So you can obtain up to a 95% loan to cost ratio, loan advancing up to 95% of cost during construction, and fixed interest rate or floating with ceiling rate, and an amortization, a really long amortization up to 50 years. So a question was submitted to Solar Alberta regarding liability insurance. So just starting off with, why would one need insurance for an installed PV system? So, there's really two reasons: property insurance. So property owners really should, if they are going down the PV route, notify their insurance of any addition or improvement or intended to ensure that the value of the system is covered in the event of an insurable loss. From a liability perspective, property owners should discuss with their insurer whether the addition would substantially increase the liability risk for the underwriter, in which case owners may wish to increase the commercial general liability coverage limits. In our experience, this isn't typically required, but again, this is a very case-specific thing that you would want to discuss. So some of the risks are variable and site-specific, and a couple things that you can do to mitigate. So you're seeing, a potential snow shed image here. So snow guards, module level power electronics for safety, and also working with a qualified designer installer is going to mitigate a lot of those challenges. So the risk tolerance is very much company specific. And so again, you'll want to broach this with your underwriter or your broker to ensure that you can be covered. And again, similar to the last one, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm only given a little bit of guidance, but you'll want to dig in deeper on that. So PV system design considerations. So I offer these in no particular order, but there's oftentimes we'll start a conversation with what's the goals and ambitions for solar PV, a very important conversation. I would advise that economies of scale are very important. If we're talking a 2 kilowatt system, those typically aren't economically viable. But when we get up to the 50 to 100 kilowatt systems on a multifamily home, they do become more viable. And then there's different ways to connect systems, whether when you're above 150 kilowatts AC or inverter output, you become a pool participant. So that's a large microgenerator. So having a conversation about what kind of risk appetite you might have. The roof types are very important. So whether it be new construction or existing, if it's a flat roof system, we're going to be bringing a different approach than we will with a flush mounted metal or an asphalt or a rubber shingle roof. So this dictates the loading. So we go anywhere from about 3 pounds per square foot upwards of 10 or more pounds per square foot, and the costs do vary quite considerably. With these, they can also require then a structural evaluation. So depending on the project, the building, ideally building plans are available so that it's just a desktop review. But if those aren't available, then an additional investigation is required, and that can be quite a costly expense. So we'll also look at the electrical. And so typically on a lot of multifamily, it's 3-phase, 120, 208 or 347, 600. But we also deal with single phase projects as well. Electrical can often be a limiting factor in addition to rooftop area, existing electrical or planned electrical. And this is why we like to be involved fairly early. Some of the switch gear being specified may not be appropriate for the type of solar ambitions. And the point of interconnection. So the closer we are to the point of interconnection, whether that be a rooftop penthouse, elevator panel or something like that, the lower the cost would be. So that's not required. We can always get the energy back to the parkade or basement or wherever the main distribution panel is, but one of those things that's quite nice. Roof complexity and access, and Heather mentioned this one. So the closer we are to it, the easier access that we have to the site, the costs would result for an installation. And so we do love the simplicity. So large blank slates, and I'll show you some examples of that. So a little bit of the anatomy of solar PV for people who aren't as familiar with a flat roof system, which is typically what we're seeing for most, especially new construction multifamily projects. In this case, it's on a rolled on asphalt. You see a rail-based system with 31-pound concrete blocks. So this is in this case, it was almost 1,700 blocks, 31-pound blocks for a total of 52,000 pounds of ballast. So this is a ballasted system we added to the system to weigh it down. There's no attachments, so this is nice for asset owners. In this case, you're seeing with the modules mounted in portrait orientation, so same system, just with the modules. But I want to talk a little bit about the economics. It's really important that individuals trying to understand if solar is a good fit, understand how we calculate the economics. So first, we have a retail rate for electricity. So in this case, I've assumed 11.5 cents. We've also got the variable portions. So in this case, on a medium commercial facility, we've got a variable transmission cost of about 1 cent. And then we've got local area access fees. So this is a Calgary example in the NMAX territory, but it would be the same for EPCOR or anywhere else. So in this case, your actual savings rate, the variable costs included, are about 14 cents a kilowatt hour. So when you're comparing solar PV to that savings rate, the best metric we can give you is actually the levelized cost of electricity rather than a payback, which is an unknown. So in Alberta, typically what we're seeing is levelized cost of electricity of around 5 to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So then you can compare that to your cost from the grid, which, as noted on the previous slide, was about 14 cents. And so this is a good comparison that you can make that investment decision. So next we'll move into some show and tell. This will be fairly rapid fire. This is a couple of examples of BIPV. These aren't multifamily, but just for examples in both Calgary and Edmonton. New construction, we typically start with a roof plan from an architect. So we'll have all sorts of keep out areas, roof drains, walkways, penthouses, etc. And so we'll do a layout based on that. Again, the blockier we can get, the better. So we take that, and then what we do is the construction, when we get to site, it's not always what we see on the plan. So we're making some adjustments in real time. What you see here is a DC optimized string inverter system. The inverters are actually mounted on the penthouse wall. And so this is a pretty common multifamily building, and this is in Bridgeland here in Calgary. This is another example of where we're brought in early on in kind of the feasibility stage for a multi-family project. This is the Elders Lodge, AFCC Elders Lodge in Calgary. They at one point were looking to get to net zero. Unfortunately, they couldn't get the funding to support this. So what we ended up with was something a little bit different. We weren't able to incorporate the rooftop, but you're still seeing those facade mounted, not BIPV, just facade mounted PV panels, and a much smaller 14 kilowatt array. An Edmonton example, this is a housing cooperative that came to us early on in their construction and wanted to get as much solar as they could. In this case, we were rooftop limited in the design. And so there's an illustration of the lower section of the roof. Inverters are mounted within the array, providing no shading on the PV modules themselves. This is Westman Village in Calgary. So you've seen all sorts of different arrays on different rooftops. So there's basically a different type of mounting system for each rooftop. And this gives you an understanding. In this case, every building does have solar. And just a little bit further east, now we're seeing some flush mounted as well. So all of these systems, again, are connected to the house or the common loads panel. They aren't connected to individual panels. The net zero MERB. So this is net zero for $0, a really cool rollout here in Calgary. It's about 55 kilowatts, so 7 different arrays on 7 upper floors. This one goes back quite a bit further. So this one predates my time with Skyfire, it's about 2013. So this is Landmark large park, a fairly large for, especially in its day, 140 kilowatt array, flush mounted on asphalt shingles. In Calgary, a co-housing cooperative. So this is one, it was a retrofit project. So this one came in well after it was occupied. They knew their electrical consumption, and they were able to take advantage of some rebates in the day to get to net zero. So this is a relatively, higher density project getting to net zero, and they even incorporate some north-facing PV modules, which is fairly uncommon. A little bit further west, quite a bit further west in Okanagan, you're seeing again on a similar, the 4-story. This is student housing at UBCO. Nice large block arrays. That's what we really like to see if we're working on a new build construction project. Similarly, you're seeing PV modules the same way, oriented due south, nice even blocks, being flanked by heat pumps in this array. And a little bit different. So this isn't a multi-family project. This is an office building, and it's a parkade. So in this case, what they've done is we've built a custom carport structure to incorporate solar, and so it's just seeing it from a little bit different perspective there. So that carport structure does cover both vehicle bays there. And another project in downtown Kelowna. So solar PV is definitely taking off on multifamily projects. And finally, this one in Naramata. So this is a flush mounted on a seniors housing facility. So this is actually getting them to pretty close to net zero for all of their occupants on an annual basis. And this one's really near and dear to our hearts, as we actually donated the system through our kind of one of our B Corp initiatives. And just giving you a little bit of indication of when things get a little more challenging. So this is a drone flight we did prior to construction on a new construction project. So a lot of roof penetrations, a lot of goosenecks. So we flew this one before we did a layout. And then, we can certainly work with that type of rooftop. It just makes it a little bit more challenging. And there are going to be compromises. In this case, you can see some future shading. There's just no way around it. But, it just goes to show you we can work with pretty much everything. It's just sometimes we have to make some compromises. And then you can also display this in your lobby. So if you're doing this on a multifamily project and you want to be able to display that, we can certainly provide options for that. And while I said, right off the hop that building in Calgary was not a good solar structure, and high rises generally aren't, it's not a for sure no-go. This is a very large tower project in Burnaby. So it is only 31 kilowatts. So you're not seeing a whole lot. You're seeing part of that array up on the very top, and then a portion on the podium down below. So with that, I will open it up to questions, and thank you for bearing through that.
Okay, thanks both to Heather and to Greg for those very informative presentations. I really enjoyed them, and I really love seeing the concrete examples. And I think I'm going to have to go on a road trip and actually check out a few of them around the city. So just a reminder to people to please put your questions into the Q&A, not the chat. And also if people could go in and upvote their questions so that we get to the highest priority questions first. Okay, we'll get started here. There's one from Sandra. She says, how resilient are solar panels to potential damage due to hail and strong winds? Referencing the damaging weather storms that we've had in recent years. So Heather or Greg, but either one of you could probably share some insights on that.
Well, I'll just mention that, solar panels modules are really they're tested for hails, so they're very durable. They can't withstand like hail. If it's bigger than your fist, nothing can really handle that. But for your average hailstorm, they're very durable, and in fact, they are used in many places to protect things. So, for example, you'll find solar over carports, especially at dealerships, because they want the solar, which is very durable, to protect the cars from the hail damage, because the cars are not as durable. So, but I'll leave it to Greg to maybe comment further on that.
Yeah, I'll validate that. In our first almost 20 years in business, we had no insurance claims for solar modules, but things are changing, right? I think everyone's on this call is probably of the mind that climate change is real, and we've when I was growing up, large hail was golf ball size. We went to baseball, but now we're talking grapefruit size hail. So this is a challenge that PV manufacturers aren't going to be able to deal with. Despite the testing and best measures. They have really resilient modules, but if we're talking high velocity wind and hail, there's only so much that you can do. Ideally, mounting up on a south facing roof is going to be one of your best insurance though. Typically hail comes out of the north, so the more you can have for tilt angle, the more it's going to be a glancing blow versus a direct impact.
Okay, thanks for that. Question now from Lisa. Are multi-unit residential buildings limited in PV installed capacity to the annual electricity consumption similar to the cap for single-family homes? If so, are there any legal loopholes you are aware of? In your experience, is a consumption cap usually a limited factor, or is roof or wall surface the limiting factor?
Maybe I'll touch on the first part of that question, Greg, around the regulations, and maybe you can touch on the second part. But yeah, so ultimately, anything that's using the microgeneration regulation in Alberta, which is basically all residential, is going to be held to that same standard. So you can only produce as much as you consume. And of course, that is, as I mentioned in my presentation, related to, who's paying the bill, which meter are you talking about, and all that jazz. There is the small scale regulation, which we are learning about tomorrow at lunch. And the small scale regulation, I am told, was created to allow some folks to start making a bit of money and have a larger array. Now, I know very few folks who have been able to figure that out, which is why we've invited the government of Alberta to come present tomorrow. But apparently that was the intent. So your limitations really relate to which regulation you're working under. If you're working under the microgeneration regulation, yes, your sizing is limited to your consumption. If you decide to go and try out the small scale generation regulation, well, you have some opportunities there, but also some hoops to jump through. And not many people have tried that yet. So you'll be many folks doing that will be working out the kinks for the rest of us. Anything to add though, Greg?
Yeah, agreed. Small scale generation, I don't think it was really intended for these types of rooftops. They're just not going to be large enough scale to justify the additional costs and burdens. Microgeneration is in just about in every case going to be your best bet for really a fairly streamlined connection process, very limited costs aside from the actual cost of the PV system. One other thing that could be investigated, it's not straightforward, would be aggregation. So there is aggregation is permitted within the microgeneration regulation. It does require all of the bills and to be on the same rate class. So that becomes really challenging in multifamily, right? Everybody has to be with the same retailer on the same rate class, and that's not typically how it would work. So in our experience, so it typically you're going to be either limited by rooftop area or electrical capacity. It's those are two things that would say are pretty consistent.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, it certainly sounds like and with the illustrations you provided that there are some challenges, but it's good to see some examples out there where things are at least moving forward and testing out new approaches. So I'll move on to the next question. This individual said they recently saw a building integrated PV project where the PV modules were mounted on or used as the balcony railings on a high-rise apartment building. Do you think mounting PV modules like this is more cost-effective than mounting PV modules on a building wall surface? What are the pros and cons that you can think of around mounting solar panels? Greg, maybe do you want to take that one to start?
Sure. And I'll just preface it by saying we don't have a lot of experience with BIPV. We've got limited experience there. It's always going to be more costly. There's just no question about it. Some of those glass type integrated applications, they work great when you can replace the cladding. The cladding cost can be a certain dollars per square foot, and the premium to go BIPV isn't a lot more. Depending on how opaque or transparent you want it, that's going to dictate how efficient the actual panel is. If you're trying to do a cost-effective installation and it's really about the economics, BIPV is probably not the best approach. Facade mounted can make more sense. At our latitude, we get relatively good production during the winter months on vertical. It is typically a higher cost, especially if it's a tower where you're working from swing stage. So there's a lot more labor time involved in something like that relative to a rooftop array.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing to that, which I heard at a presentation this week, and it really depends too if you're going to be replacing something anyways. So like if you're doing a full balcony swap out, then maybe some of those considerations would not appear as costly as an addition would. I'm not sure because I've never costed that out, but that's what I've also heard for a variety of building integrated products is if you're having to do a full replacement anyways, then maybe the cost seems a little less at a large scale. But I'm also kind of curious in watching that space because I do think that just like the cost of regular solar PV has come down so much in the last while, I'm curious to see if those building integrated products start to drop. That's just something I'm kind of keeping an eye on because it's definitely appealing to a lot of consumers, that's for sure.
For sure, and I just add to that. I think you're right. Things will change. It's always going to be easier and more cost effective to do it during construction versus a retrofit. Trying to get that energy back to an electrical panel, right? So if we're in a tower and we're looking to add, a couple of panels on the glass, it's we're talking hundreds of watts, not kilowatts, and so the cost to connect that, back to your electrical panel for the benefit. I hate to throw cold water on it, but there's that practical reality of if you want to do it for other reasons other than economics, then sure, but for the foreseeable future, it's probably not there.
Okay, those are good insights for how you can maybe seize some opportunities. So I'll move to the next question. Maybe Heather, I'll get you to take this one first. It's around subsidy programs. And are there any subsidy programs available to renters in a condo complex? Additionally, is a landlord owner eligible for the subsidies?
Yeah, so Greg mentioned the Clean Energy Improvement Program earlier, and I just want to flag that for all the renters out there. You can't apply, but your landlord can. So if you have a good relationship with your landlord, I want to recommend you read up on the Clean Energy Improvement Program. If you have it in your municipality, offer to do the footwork for your landlord because a lot of landlords would be open to it, but they just don't want to jump through the hoops. So if you're willing to help them with the application form, to be available when the contractors show up and don't expect them to come every time a contractor comes, there's a lot you can do as a renter to make it easier for your landlord to adopt solar to benefit you both. And it really is a win-win. And so, I'm looking into it right now for a friend who's a tenant of mine and trying to figure out how to use the Clean Energy Improvement Program because it is available for secondary properties. The federal grant is not. So federal grant, the Canada Greener Homes, is only available to folks who have in their principal or primary residence. You cannot use it to reduce the utility bill costs for your tenants. So that's a frustration we have at Solar Alberta, and we are advocating to try and change that so that renters can benefit as well. But yes, you will find some people get a little overwhelmed just by the idea of like jumping through some forms on a website. So you definitely want to support them with that process and make it easy for them to adopt solar, because it will definitely benefit you as a renter for sure.
Okay. I'll switch tacks a little bit here and I'll ask Greg to take this one. Do you prefer to install solar or on asphalt shingles or standing seam metal roofs? Generally, does it change the cost of installation?
Question near and dear to my heart. I'm a huge fan of standing seam metal myself. Just given the product life, right? It's these rooftops have yes, sometimes a 50-year warranty or that kind of life versus an asphalt shingle roof, which even in the best case is going to be probably closer to 20 years. So with a PV system having now warranties, PV modules have 30-year power output warranties. You're going to have to replace the roof. So you're looking at a remove and replace. There is a cost to that. That's going to erode the economics. If you're in a position where you're looking to replace the roof and you can manage the cost of standing seam metal, it is quite a bit more costly. But it's again that future proofing, and you're going to avoid that cost down the road. So, and that also plays into the hail question as well. I think Metal and the city of Calgary had a program last year, a couple of years ago, looking to transition rooftops to more durable materials. So rubber shingles are also have a longer life, recycled rubber shingles. So certainly I would point anyone to standing seam metal if they're already looking to that.
Okay.
And sorry, just to address the cost piece of that, it's going to be very comparable unless it's really high angles, and trying to work at a 45-degree on metal is a little bit slower. But generally speaking, the attachments are going to be very comparable between a shingle and metal.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks. The next question has a little bit around safety of solar panels, and it says, what about issues from the fire department regarding solar? This individual has heard a fire captain say once that if a house is on fire and has solar panels, they have to stand and watch it burn. And this one's been upvoted by 4 people, so there's a bit of interest in this one.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting I guess question or comment, really, and not the first time I've heard that. The reality is that a fire department is not going to fight a structure fire like that from the rooftop anyways, regardless if it has solar on or not. So I think it's a little bit of a interesting response from the individual that maybe made that claim. The PV systems themselves are inherently safe. There's different types of approaches, microinverters and DC optimized systems, which are inherently safer than a string inverter system. Code changes in a few years ago, leading to rapid shutdown requirements for string inverter systems. So there's a switch at the meter base. So, these first responders know about these changes. I don't know that it's as a significant of a concern as this inquirer might have been led to believe.
Yeah, no, that's great to get those insights, so that when we do get those kind of questions, we can all, advocate for the practices that are underway to make sure that things are safe. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Probably our last question for today is if there's a good roof and potentially solar-friendly board, how can a condo owner overcome a board's worry that increasing electrification dependence exposes the board to higher electricity transmission and distribution costs because of upcoming, big needs about Alberta's grid?
Yeah, I would say there's a little bit of confusion there that you need to unpack. So sometimes people confuse a solar array with like an electric vehicle, right? But they're very different things. So a solar array means that you're producing some of your electricity. So you're actually, with it, you're reducing the transmission and distribution costs, the portion of it that's variable. So the solar array will actually help you if your board is worried about that. Your solar array is actually going to reduce those costs. They're not going to eliminate it, because there are some fixed components, but it's going to reduce the variable distribution and transmission costs because you are producing, you're a generator. There are other electric appliances like a car or a variety of electric appliances, and they are not generating, they are going to be drawing. And so I think what's happening there is a board is confused between the difference of an electric appliance, which is going to draw more electricity, versus a solar array, which is actually generating on-site electricity. The solar array is not an appliance. It is an investment in generating your own electricity to reduce your electricity costs. So it's really important to help your board understand the difference between an appliance and a generating device. Greg, anything you want to add on that?
No, quite right. I mean, the future concerns for a condo board would be, you know, if they're asking questions about future operations and maintenance, that's fair. These are low maintenance, not no maintenance. So some money should be set aside on an annual basis for that. And insurance costs, right? So, you know, to add that to your policy, there will be a small cost. But those are really the two costs from solar PV, as Heather mentioned. You know, everything else should be associated with savings.
Okay. Given that we're at time, I suggest that we end there. And I'd just like to thank everybody for attending. This presentation, as well as others from the solar show this week, will be presented on Solar Alberta's website and on YouTube channels. So if you want to follow up and hear some of the points again, that would be great. I'd also, in closing, I'd just really like to thank our sponsors. I'd like to thank Enbridge, Park Power, the City of Edmonton, and the many other organizations that are participating and sponsoring various events. So thanks again to everybody for joining in. We hope to see you at future events.